introduction about how the cells connect and everything. And now I'm going to introduce that section about diseases of the brain, because obviously you probably know many people that have brain diseases. It's a pretty common thing today. So I personally focus on a disease called ALS. So ALS is also called Lou Gehrig's disease, for people who know Lou Gehrig. It's also known through the ice bucket challenge, which is this challenge where you had to dump a bucket of ice on your head, and then you would be a little bit paralyzed for a few seconds. And this is basically the everyday life of people with ALS. They get paralyzed. You might also know Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking has a very rare variant of ALS. So it's a pretty common, it's a rare disease, but it's fairly common in Canada. So ALS is a disease of the motor neurons. Motor neurons deteriorate, leading to paralysis and eventually death. So I mentioned Stephen Hawking suffers from a very rare variant of it because he's been living with it for decades, but actually people with ALS, once they're diagnosed, they actually die within 5 years approximately. And that's why research is so important in the ALS field, because there is no treatment to date to help those people. So now I talked about motor neurons. You might not know what motor neurons are. Motor neurons are the neurons that control your muscle. So basically, there are two types of motor neurons in the brain. You have the purple ones here, which are basically in the brain, and then the green ones that are in the spinal cord. So the brain motor neurons basically create a message, an electrical message, and then they synapse through synapses, like Chris explained, with the spinal cord motor neurons, and they send that message down. And then the spinal cord motor neurons relay the message down to the muscle, allowing movement. So this is basically a cascade of events. Now in ALS, the spinal cord motor neurons end up dying for an unknown reason, leading to a cascade that is incomplete. And so no one knows why those motor neurons die in ALS, but we have a theory in our lab. So our hypothesis is that basically the brain motor neurons that send out the information would get hyperactive. Now you may think that hyperactivity, sending down that much information to the neurons that relay the information might be good, because it would increase their activity and make them more efficient, but actually it doesn't, because those cells are really sensitive. So when you send them too many electrical messages, they end up dying. And that's why the patients are paralyzed. That's why they don't have the possibility to move anymore. Now, how are you going to investigate this in people? Obviously not by taking their brains out and looking into them, because we're not allowed, apparently. So, so we use stem cells as a model. So as much as I respect the fruit fly, stem cells allow us to have a human model to study a human disease. And so we take cells from patients, stem cells or blood cells from patients. We culture them in a dish in our labs, and then we basically add factors onto them. So like DNA factors, the Yamanaka factors from the person who discovered them. And then neuronal path triggers, so something that drives them to a neuronal path. And then we obtain brain neurons, the same kind I was talking about before. And once we have these brain neurons, what we can do, and it's pretty amazing, is stick a pipette into one neuron, one single cell, and then record the activity through a big machine called an electrophysiology rig. And so the currents are going to be recorded in the pipette, sent out to the electrophysiology rig, and then this rig is linked to a computer where we can see the signal appear. So this is that would be a neuron that has a normal activity, and then we can detect hyperactivity or overactivity, and we can study why those neurons get hyperactive in our lab, and then relate this to how the disease starts, basically. Now, this is 2 years of work, 2 years of life, but why do I bother doing that? Basically, understanding how these neurons get hyperactive and why these neurons get hyperactive could lead us to potentially find drugs or treatments or something to prevent them from getting hyperactive, and then prevent or slow down the disease progression. And then, in the end, reaching our goal, which is to help people with ALS improve their quality of life and potentially cure the disease. So thank you for your attention. And,